Certainty is often mistaken for intelligence. It isn't. The people who understand the world most deeply are rarely the ones speaking with absolute confidence. They're the ones quietly interrogating their own conclusions while everyone else is already defending theirs. If you've ever walked away from a meeting replaying every sentence you spoke, questioned a compliment long after everyone else forgot it, or felt strangely uncomfortable whenever you became completely convinced about something, you may have assumed your mind was working against you. The unsettling possibility is that it has been protecting you all along. Confidence feels good because the brain is designed to reduce uncertainty whenever possible. Every prediction that survives reality rewards us with a small sense of stability, a reassuring signal that the world is making sense. But intelligence changes this relationship. As your understanding expands, so does your awareness of everything you cannot yet explain. Knowledge doesn't simply fill space. It illuminates the edges of your ignorance. This is why the smartest person in the room often sounds less certain than the loudest. They aren't lacking conviction. They're seeing variables everyone else has unconsciously filtered out. And once you notice those hidden variables, certainty begins to feel less like strength and more like a dangerous temptation. This is where almost everyone misunderstands what is happening. They assume doubt is the opposite of confidence, when in reality there are two very different forms of doubt. One weakens action, the other sharpens perception. The first whispers that you are incapable. The second asks whether your assumptions deserve another look. Intelligent people gradually learn to trust the second voice because experience keeps rewarding it. Every major mistake they remember wasn't caused by questioning too much. It was caused by stopping the questioning too early. That lesson quietly reshapes the architecture of their thinking. Think about the conversations that stay with you for days. Someone makes an offhand comment during lunch. Everyone laughs. Hours later, while driving home or standing in line for coffee, your mind unexpectedly returns to those few seconds. Not because you're insecure, but because your brain continues processing information long after the moment has ended. The default mode network, active during quiet reflection, keeps connecting details beneath conscious awareness. While others have emotionally closed the event, your mind is still comparing expressions, tone, timing, and context, searching for patterns that were invisible in real time. It can feel exhausting. Yet this silent processing is also one reason intelligent people often notice truths that only become obvious to everyone else weeks later. But something even stranger happens. The more accurately your predictions succeed, the less attached you become to being right. At first, that sounds backwards. Shouldn't repeated success create stronger certainty? Surprisingly, it often creates the opposite. Every correct prediction teaches you how many unnoticed variables almost ruined it. You begin recognizing the invisible role of luck, timing, incomplete information, and changing circumstances. Instead of feeling invincible, you become more cautious. Not because your confidence disappeared, but because your confidence matured. The world starts looking less like a puzzle waiting for one correct answer and more like a moving system where today's certainty quietly expires tomorrow. Neuroscience offers an unexpected explanation. Deep inside the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex constantly monitors conflict between expectations and reality. It functions like an internal alarm system, detecting subtle errors before they become obvious. Research suggests that individuals who engage in higher levels of cognitive reflection often show stronger sensitivity to these conflicts. In everyday life, that means you might notice inconsistencies others dismiss without a second thought. A casual contradiction during an office meeting. A friend's enthusiasm that doesn't match the tension in their face. An investment opportunity that sounds perfect until one tiny detail refuses to fit. Those moments aren't random discomfort. They are signals your brain refuses to ignore. The real shift begins here. Doubt stops being an emotional reaction and becomes a method of observation. Instead of asking, "Am I right?" the intelligent mind begins asking, "What would prove me wrong?" That single question transforms everything. It interrupts confirmation bias before it hardens into identity. It creates space for Bayesian updating, the quiet habit of adjusting beliefs as new evidence arrives rather than protecting old conclusions out of pride. To outsiders, This flexibility sometimes looks indecisive. Inside the mind experiencing it, it feels like intellectual honesty. And this explains something most people completely miss. Human beings rarely seek truth as much as they seek psychological consistency. Self-verification theory suggests that people are motivated to preserve existing beliefs about themselves, even when those beliefs are limiting. If someone has built an identity around always being right, admitting uncertainty becomes emotionally threatening. The debate is no longer about evidence. It becomes about survival. Intelligent people are not immune to this instinct, but they become unusually suspicious of it. Whenever certainty feels emotionally satisfying, they instinctively ask whether satisfaction has quietly replaced accuracy. This is why compliments can become surprisingly complicated. Someone praises your work, your creativity, or your intelligence, and instead of immediately accepting it, your mind starts comparing their words against previous experiences. Was the praise genuine? Were they being polite? Did they notice something you overlooked? To an outside observer, this looks like unnecessary overthinking. Yet beneath the surface, another process is unfolding. Your brain is attempting to reduce cognitive dissonance, the tension that appears whenever external feedback conflicts with your internal model of yourself. Intelligent people often maintain more detailed self-models, making that reconciliation slower but also more precise. What happens next is surprisingly consistent. As life becomes more complex, certainty begins demanding an uncomfortable price. Every unquestioned belief narrows perception. Every rigid conclusion filters out contradictory evidence before it even reaches awareness. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and deliberate reasoning, performs best when competing possibilities remain available long enough to be evaluated. Premature certainty interrupts that process. It replaces investigation with defense. Suddenly your attention is no longer searching for reality. It is searching for proof that you were right all along. And the mind that once explored becomes a lawyer arguing for its favorite story. Pattern recognition makes this even more complicated. Intelligent people naturally detect connections between events that appear unrelated. Sometimes those connections reveal remarkable insights. Other times they create convincing illusions. The danger isn't seeing patterns. The danger is falling in love with the first explanation that fits them. This is why genuine intelligence develops an unusual relationship with restraint. Instead of rushing to complete the picture, it leaves empty spaces intentionally. It tolerates ambiguity longer than comfort would prefer because experience has repeatedly demonstrated that the missing piece often arrives after everyone else has already declared the puzzle finished. You may have noticed this during difficult relationships. While someone else confidently labels another person as selfish, manipulative, or emotionally unavailable, your mind hesitates. Not because you cannot recognize harmful behavior, but because you instinctively wonder what invisible history produced it. Attachment patterns, childhood experiences, unmet emotional needs, hidden fears. This doesn't excuse destructive actions. It simply prevents your understanding from becoming flatter than reality itself. Doubt, in this context, isn't weakness. It is compassion refusing to simplify another human being before enough evidence exists to do so. Eventually you realize something unsettling. The moments that changed your life rarely began with certainty. They began with a quiet suspicion that your current explanation was incomplete. A career choice reconsidered during a long commute. A friendship reevaluated after one strangely revealing conversation. A belief inherited from childhood that suddenly felt too small for the person you had become. Every meaningful transformation started as an unanswered question rather than an undeniable answer. And once your mind has experienced that pattern enough times, certainty no longer feels like home. Curiosity does. Curiosity, however, carries a cost that rarely gets discussed. It slows you down in a culture that rewards immediate opinions. While others confidently announce what they think after reading a headline, hearing a rumor, or watching a 30-second clip, your mind instinctively searches for what is missing. What context has been removed? Which assumption is everyone quietly sharing? What evidence would completely change this conclusion? From the outside, This hesitation can look like uncertainty. In reality, it is tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to remain psychologically stable while the answer is still incomplete. Ironically, this trait often appears weakest to those who have never needed it. That difference becomes especially visible in groups. Watch what happens during a family dinner, a boardroom discussion, or a weekend gathering with friends. The first person to sound certain often becomes the emotional anchor for everyone else. Confidence is contagious because it reduces collective anxiety. But intelligent people frequently resist joining that emotional current. Not because they enjoy disagreement, but because they notice how quickly agreement can become social performance instead of independent thought. The pressure to belong quietly competes with the desire to understand, and many people never realize they have chosen belonging long before they chose truth. This is where metacognition changes everything. Instead of merely thinking, you begin thinking about how you think. You notice your own reasoning while it is happening. You catch yourself defending an idea simply because you invested time in it. You recognize the subtle relief that arrives when new information confirms what you already believed. And you become suspicious of that relief. Not because confirmation is always wrong, but because the brain's reward system does not distinguish between what feels satisfying and what is objectively accurate. Sometimes the most comforting conclusion is simply the one that protects your identity. Almost nobody notices the next part. Intelligent people are often accused of overthinking, yet much of what looks like overthinking is actually error monitoring. The mind continuously compares expectation with reality, searching for tiny mismatches before they become major mistakes. That process can make ordinary decisions surprisingly exhausting. You replay emails before sending them. You mentally revisit conversations after they end. You question whether your memory of an event has been distorted by emotion. None of this guarantees better decisions every time. But it does create a habit of refining judgment instead of assuming it was perfect from the beginning. There is another paradox hidden beneath this habit. Doubt does not disappear as competence grows. It evolves. Early in life, uncertainty is often about whether you are capable. Later, it becomes uncertainty about whether the situation itself is as simple as it appears. An experienced surgeon still reviews the scans. A seasoned investor still questions the market narrative. A skilled writer still deletes pages that once felt brilliant. Expertise rarely eliminates doubt. It redirects it toward the places where reality is most likely to surprise you. This explains why the Dunning-Kruger effect is so psychologically fascinating. People with limited understanding often lack the knowledge required to recognize the limits of their own understanding. Meanwhile, those who have explored a subject deeply become painfully aware of its complexity. The more you learn about human behavior, relationships, leadership, or even your own mind, the harder it becomes to speak in absolutes. Not because truth disappears, but because simplistic certainty does. Intelligence replaces black and white thinking with gradients, probabilities, and competing explanations that can all contain fragments of reality. Yet this does not mean intelligent people live in endless hesitation. That is another common misunderstanding. They eventually make decisions just like everyone else. The difference lies in what happens afterward. Instead of treating a decision as proof that they were right, they treat it as another hypothesis meeting reality. If new evidence appears, they adjust. If circumstances change, they adapt. This willingness to update is not weakness. It is psychological flexibility, one of the strongest predictors of resilience. A rigid mind survives only when the world remains predictable. A flexible mind survives because it expects the world to change. Reward prediction error plays a surprisingly important role here. The brain learns most efficiently when reality differs from expectation. Every meaningful surprise becomes an opportunity for refinement. Intelligent people gradually stop seeing mistakes as threats to their identity because mistakes provide the very information that certainty could never reveal. The question quietly changes from, how can I avoid being wrong, to, what can being wrong teach me that being right never could? That shift transforms failure from an accusation into data. Over time, something deeply personal begins to change. Your identity becomes less attached to conclusions and more attached to the process of discovering them. You no longer need every belief to remain permanent because your sense of self is no longer built upon always being correct. This is what epistemic humility truly looks like. It is not pretending to know less than you do. It is recognizing that reality will always contain more detail than your current understanding can hold. Strangely, that realization does not make the world feel smaller. It makes it infinitely more interesting. Perhaps this is why intelligent people sometimes seem quieter than expected. Silence is often mistaken for uncertainty when it is actually observation. While others rush to fill every pause, they are still collecting information. They understand that words have a tendency to lock thoughts into place. Once spoken, an opinion becomes surprisingly difficult to revise because the ego begins defending it. Keeping a thought private for a little longer leaves it free to evolve. What looks like hesitation is often intellectual patience. Eventually, the deepest form of trust no longer comes from certainty at all. It comes from knowing that your mind is willing to correct itself. That confidence cannot be shattered by new evidence because it was never built upon being infallible. It was built upon adaptation. And adaptation has always been the quieter form of strength. Perhaps that is the final irony. The people who appear least certain are often the ones standing on the strongest psychological foundation because they have learned that truth is not something you possess once and forever. It is something you approach by repeatedly letting go of the comforting stories your mind wanted to keep. In the end, intelligence is measured less by the answers you protect than by the questions you are still brave enough to ask.